I was watching television in the family room when my son-in-law walked in and turned it off. No warning, no excuse me, just the click of the remote and sudden silence. He didn't even look at me. He stood there like the room already belonged to him and said, "Go to your room, old woman. This living room is mine now." My daughter was standing in the kitchen doorway. She didn't say a word, she just dropped her gaze to the floor. That moment changed everything. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't ask why. Because when you reach a certain age, you stop begging people to treat you like a human being. You just start paying attention. That evening had been peaceful before that, the kind of peace you earn after decades of putting everyone else first. I was sitting in my green velvet armchair, the one I bought 15 years ago with the first Social Security check I received after my husband passed away. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The cushions were worn just enough to know my shape. The armrest still held a faint smell of lemon oil from when I wiped it down every Saturday morning. A cup of coffee rested on the end table. Peach cobbler cooled in the kitchen. The news murmured softly on the television. This was my quiet time, the time when the house finally exhaled. Then the front door slammed, hard. I didn't turn my head. I already knew who it was, Derek. My son-in-law, he always entered like that, loud, heavy-footed, like noise itself was a form of authority. Behind him came my daughter, Lena, carrying shopping bags. Her shoulders were hunched forward as if she were already apologizing to the world. She didn't look at me, she never did anymore. Derek walked straight across the room and planted himself in front of the TV, blocking my view. He snorted when he noticed I was sitting there doing nothing. Doing nothing always bothered him. He picked up the remote and pressed the power button. The screen went black. "To your room," he barked. "I've got the game on. This is my living room now." The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. I slowly shifted my gaze to Lena. She stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, her fingers clenched so tightly around the shopping bags that her knuckles had turned white. Our eyes met. I waited, not for a speech, not for a fight. Just one sentence, "Don't talk to my mother like that." But Lena looked down. She adjusted one of the bags as if something inside it had shifted. That small movement hurt more than his words, because words can be ignorance. Silence is a decision, and in that moment I understood exactly where I stood in my own home. I had worked 35 years at the county recorder's office. When you spend that long around deeds, titles, wills, and property records, you learn one important thing. Words fade, paper doesn't. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked dry and sharp, the sound echoing in the room like a final stamp on a document. Derek had already sprawled onto my couch, one leg crossed over the other, cracking open a soda without even looking at me. In his world, I had become part of the furniture, something that was always there and never questioned. I walked past him without a word and turned into my bedroom, not to cry, not to hide. I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and pulled out a stiff leather pouch I only used for bank business. From beneath it, I retrieved a blue folder bound with an old elastic band. Inside were papers I hadn't needed in years. The deed, yellowed at the edges but solid as iron. Owner Celeste Emma Verson, my name, my house. I looked at myself in the mirror, short gray hair, glasses on a chain, linen trousers, a navy blouse. I looked like exactly what Derek thought I was, just a harmless old woman. That had always been my advantage. As long as people think you're harmless, they tell on themselves. I closed the folder, tucked it back into the drawer, and returned to the family room. Derek had turned on the sports channel and cranked the volume. Lena was in the kitchen, clattering dishes louder than necessary, a noise meant to fill the silence so she wouldn't have to speak. I walked straight to the front door. My heel clicked against the hardwood floor. Derek glanced over his shoulder and smirked. "Taking a walk, Celeste? Don't get lost. At your age?" I didn't answer. I turned the deadbolt. For a brief second, I looked around the room. The framed print of the Savannah riverfront, the rug I vacuumed every Saturday, my daughter's shadow in the kitchen, my son-in-law's back on my couch. I felt the keys in my pocket, cold metal, steady. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, quietly, firmly, like placing a period at the end of a sentence. The night air was crisp. I wasn't cold. I locked the front gate from the outside, walked to the corner, and hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Grand Hyatt downtown," I said. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I took out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in years. Andrew V. Sterling, attorney at law. "We used to work in the same building, him on property disputes, me on deeds." He answered on the second ring. "Celeste, it's nearly 9. What's wrong?" "I need your help," I said calmly. "I have court tomorrow morning." There was a pause. "Why the rush?" "Because tonight," I said, watching the city lights blur past the window. I woke up. "I'm listening. I need to evict 2 adults from my property." Another pause. "You live with your daughter and son-in-law." "Exactly," he exhaled slowly. "What happened?" He told me to go to my room, said the living room was his. My daughter stayed silent. Andrew didn't interrupt. "The house is mine," I continued. They've lived there 4 years, no lease, no rent. I can prepare a notice to quit, he said. 30 days, legal and clean, that's fine. And personal service? Yes, I'll send my associate tomorrow morning. Roman Cruz, he's professional, calm. That will do. I assume you want consequences included. Yes, I said, back rent, penalty for holding over. You're sure about this? I'm wounded, I replied. And a wounded woman who knows her rights is dangerous. He chuckled softly. I'll see you at 8. The hotel lobby smelled like clean floors and fresh flowers. The doorman opened the car door and smiled at me like I mattered. Can I help with your luggage? I only have my purse, I said, stepping inside, and my dignity. The room was quiet. I ordered soup and a glass of wine and ate slowly. That night, I slept like someone who had finally taken the wheel. I woke with the sun, showered, same clothes, different posture. At 8 o'clock sharp, I signed the papers. Every stroke of the pen felt final. Roman is on his way, Andrew said. 20 minutes. I'll wait, I replied. At 9:30, my phone began to vibrate. I watched the screen light up. Lena, I let it ring 3 times before answering. Mama, she cried, breathless. There's a man here. He has papers. Derek is screaming. What is happening? That man, I said calmly, is delivering reality. When I ended the call, the silence felt intentional, not empty, intentional. I sat in the reception area of Andrew Sterling's office, my purse resting neatly on my lap, my hands folded as if I were waiting for a dentist appointment instead of dismantling a life I had quietly supported for years. The coffee machine hummed in the corner. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Tick, tock. Somewhere across town in my living room, panic was discovering it had teeth. I didn't rush home. That was important. When you've spent your whole life running to fix other people's messes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop moving. Andrew stepped out of his office and leaned against the doorframe. Roman served the papers, he said. They accepted them. Loudly, I imagined as much. He asked if you were available to talk. I am, I replied, but not to them. Andrew nodded, understanding immediately. You're doing the right thing, Celeste. I'm not doing the right thing, I corrected gently. I'm doing the necessary thing. I left the office and walked 2 blocks to the mall, not because I needed anything urgently, but because I wanted to remind myself what it felt like to move through the world without shrinking. Inside a small boutique, a woman with a neat bun and kind eyes approached me. Can I help you find something? Yes, I said. I need a uniform. She smiled. For work, for boundaries. She didn't ask another question. She brought me tailored navy trousers, a crisp white blouse, and a beige linen blazer. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just authority in fabric form. In the mirror, I looked exactly the same and completely different. I paid, folded my old sweater into a donation bag, and walked out standing straighter. I was halfway through a quiet lunch, soup and bread, nothing fancy, when my phone buzzed again. Lena, this time I answered. Mama, she whispered, as if whispering could undo what had already been said. Derek is furious. He says you humiliated him. I didn't humiliate him, I said calmly. He did that himself. You cut off the internet, she said. He has meetings, then he should pay for it. There was a pause. He says you're punishing us. I'm no longer financing disrespect. Another pause. I don't understand, she said softly. That, I replied, is because you've been surviving instead of thinking. She inhaled sharply. Where are you? I'm safe, I said, and for the first time in years, I'm quiet. She started to cry. I didn't hang up. I just didn't rescue her either. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls: the internet provider, the cable company, the bank. Each call was short, each decision precise. Temporary suspension, primary account holder, supplementary card blocked, no anger, no drama, just adjustments. Within minutes, my phone lit up with notifications. Transaction declined, subscription suspended. Access restricted, reality in its purest form. That evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, calls, voicemails from Derek, from Lena, from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned the phone face down. Silence is not cruelty. Its clarity, the hotel room that night felt different, not like an escape, like a pause. I sat by the window and watched traffic move like veins through the city. I thought about how many years I had paid for everything quietly. The utilities, the groceries, the car payments, the temporary help that turned permanent, all while being told to go to my room. I slept deeply, without guilt. The next morning, I met Andrew again. They want to negotiate, he said. Already, desperation speeds things up. They claim adverse possession. I smiled. Did they read the law? Yes, he said dryly. After they mentioned it, he slid a folder across the desk. They're coming in tomorrow, together. Good, I said. Truth works best with witnesses. When I left his office, I walked instead of taking a cab. The sun was warm. I felt oddly light. I passed a shop window and caught my reflection. Still the same woman, just no longer available for nonsense. That evening, Lena came to the hotel. She looked small standing in the lobby, not physically, emotionally. She approached cautiously, like a child unsure whether she was allowed to speak. Can we talk? She asked. Yes, I said, but we will sit. We sat in armchairs across from each other, neutral ground. Why didn't you defend me? I asked quietly. She flinched. I didn't want to make things worse. Worse than telling your mother to leave her own living room? She didn't answer. He says you've changed, she whispered. I have, I replied. I stopped pretending, she cried then, not loudly. Just tears slipping down her face like something finally cracking. He says if we leave, he'll divorce me. I leaned forward. If your marriage depends on my house and my bank account, I said gently, then it's not a marriage. It's a transaction, she stared at the floor. I'm scared, she admitted. So was I said, and then I realized fear is just the body warning you that something is wrong. We sat quietly. She stood up eventually. I'll be there tomorrow, she said, at the lawyer's office. Be on time, I replied. She nodded. That night I turned off the family location app on my phone. The little dot that tracked me disappeared. I belonged to myself again. When I woke the next morning, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Tomorrow would be about truth, paper truth, the kind that doesn't yell. The conference room was cold, not uncomfortably cold, just enough to remind you that feelings weren't welcome there. That was intentional. Andrew Sterling's office had always been like that, neutral walls, a long table. Chairs that didn't invite comfort. This wasn't a place for shouting or tears. It was a place where truth sat down and waited. I arrived 10 minutes early. As always, I placed my purse on the table and arranged my papers in a straight line. The deed, the notice of termination, a copy of the utility contracts, and one slim envelope I hadn't mentioned to anyone yet. Andrew entered quietly and gave me a nod. They're downstairs, he said. Both of them good, I replied. Let's not keep reality waiting. They came in together, Derek first. He looked different, not defeated yet, but frayed. His shirt was wrinkled. His tie hung loose like it had lost its purpose. Dark shadows sat under his eyes, the kind that come from a night spent fighting problems instead of solving them. Behind him walked Lena. Her posture was smaller than usual. She clutched her purse like it might float away if she loosened her grip. Andrew gestured to the chairs. Please sit. Derek didn't sit right away. I'm not here for a lecture, he snapped. This is ridiculous. We've lived there for years. We have rights. I didn't speak yet. Silence makes men like Derek uncomfortable. Andrew adjusted his glasses. The property belongs solely to Mrs. Everson, he said evenly. There is no lease, no rent agreement. The notice served is lawful, Derek scoffed. You can't just throw family out. I finally looked at him. You threw me out of my own living room, I said calmly. This is simply the legal version of that. He stared at me like he didn't recognize my voice. You shut off the internet, he accused. You blocked accounts, that's harassment. No, Andrew replied smoothly. That's ownership. I watched Derek's jaw tighten. You're doing this out of spite, he said. Because I told you to move. No, I replied. I'm doing this because I finally listened. Lena shifted in her seat. Mom, she began. I raised my hand gently. This isn't about emotions, I said. This is about facts. I slid the deed across the table. Owner, I said, tapping the paper. Me, then the utility contracts. Payer, I continued. Also me, then the notice. Termination, I finished. Effective, Derek leaned back, arms crossed. You're acting like a businesswoman instead of a mother. I was a businesswoman long before I was a mother, I replied, and I never confused the two. That house was supposed to help us get ahead, he said bitterly. We were saving. I opened the slim envelope. Let's talk about that. Andrew slid it toward Lena. Mrs. Everson asked us to review recent financial activity. Lena looked up sharply. What activity? Derek's confidence faltered. Why are you dragging money into this? He snapped. Because money is what you were using, I said quietly, and I wanted to see where it went. Lena opened the envelope. Inside were statements. Credit balances, margin calls, overdraft notices. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. No, she whispered. No, this can't be right. Derek reached for the papers. Andrew stopped him with a raised hand. Let her read. The room was silent except for the soft rustle of paper. I thought we were saving, Lena said, her voice breaking. You told me it was invested. It was, Derek shot back. Temporarily. In what? She asked. He didn't answer. Because all I see here, Andrew said calmly, is debt. Lena's breath hitched. There's nothing left, she asked. I spoke gently. There was never anything there to begin with. Derek slammed his hand on the table. I was going to fix it, he yelled. I just needed time. You had time, I replied. You had 4 years and my money. Lena covered her mouth. You used my mother's credit cards, she whispered. He didn't deny it. That's what family does, he muttered. They help. No, I said, standing slowly. Family doesn't silence, insult, or consume. I turned to Lena. I will always be your mother, I said. But I will never again be your safety net while someone else pulls the strings. She looked at me with red eyes. What happens now? Andrew answered. You have 30 days to vacate. And after that? Derek demanded. After that, Andrew replied, the locks change. Derek slumped back into his chair. The room felt smaller now. He looked at Lena, then at me. You're tearing this family apart. I met his gaze. No, I said. I stopped holding it together alone. Lena inhaled shakily. I need time, she said. You have it, I replied, but not my house. Andrew stood. This meeting is concluded. Derek stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. Lena remained seated for a moment longer. She looked up at me. I didn't see it, she said softly. I really didn't. I know, I replied, and now you do. She nodded once and followed Derek out. When the door closed, the room felt lighter. Andrew exhaled. You okay? I nodded. I've never been clearer. He smiled slightly. Most people wait too long. I waited long enough, I said. That afternoon, my phone buzzed once. A message from Lena. I didn't get in his car. I'm walking. I replied with 3 words. Good, keep walking. That evening, I returned to the hotel. I took off my blazer, set my keys on the table. For the first time in years, there were no extra sets beside mine, just my own. The first morning after the meeting, I woke without an alarm. That alone told me something had changed. For years, my body had learned to wake early out of habit, anticipating needs, anticipating moods, anticipating noise. Even when there was nowhere to rush to, my mind stayed on duty. But that morning, the quiet felt settled, not temporary, settled. I made coffee in the hotel room and sat by the window, watching the city stretch awake. People hurried below, briefcases swinging, phones pressed to ears. Everyone seemed to be negotiating something: time, money, patience. I had already negotiated mine, 30 days. That number hung in the air like a line drawn cleanly across a page. I didn't go home that day. That was deliberate. When you change the rules, you don't rush back into the old game. Instead, I went to the bank. The same branch I had used for years. The teller greeted me by name. Good morning, Mrs. Everson. Good morning, I replied. I'd like to make a few changes. We sat in a small office with frosted glass walls. I moved slowly, methodically. Primary account confirmed, beneficiaries updated, supplementary access removed permanently. The teller nodded, professional and uncurious. When she slid the final document across the desk, I signed without hesitation. Each signature felt lighter than the last. That afternoon, Lena called, not crying this time, just tired. I'm staying with a friend, she said. I didn't go back. That's good, I replied. He keeps texting, she added. He says he'll fix things. Has he fixed anything yet? Silence. No, she admitted. Then listen to actions, not promises, I said gently. She exhaled. I don't know who I am without managing him. That's what the 30 days are for, I said. To find out, the house stayed quiet without me. Too quiet, according to Derek. I knew that because he texted. Short messages at first. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Then longer ones. Accusations disguised as apologies. I didn't respond. Silence isn't ignoring, it's choosing. On day 5, the utilities fully shut down. Not the basics, just the extras. No cable, no premium sports, no high-speed internet. The things Derek had treated like oxygen. That night, my phone buzzed again. You're ruining my job. I typed back one sentence. You should pay for your work tools. Then I turned the phone face down. On day 7, Lena came by the hotel. She looked different already, not happy, but clearer. I found the statements, she said quietly. More of them. I didn't ask how bad. Her face answered for me. I feel stupid, she said. No, I corrected. You feel awake, she nodded slowly. I don't want to go back, she whispered. Then don't, I said. You don't need permission. She stared at her hands. I thought staying quiet was keeping the peace. Peace that only one person gets isn't peace, I replied. She smiled faintly. I think I finally understand you. By the second week, the house began to feel foreign to them. That's the thing about ownership. When it's real, you don't have to announce it. The walls know. Derek started packing early. Not out of respect, out of panic. He moved loudly, aggressively, as if noise might change deadlines. I knew because Roman updated me regularly. They're tense, he said, but compliant. That's enough, I replied. I went shopping again that week, not for clothes, for paint samples. Soft peach, warm cream, something that reflected light instead of swallowing it. I stood in the aisle for a long time, holding the cards up, imagining the walls breathing again. Imagining the armchair back in its place. Imagining quiet without fear. On day 15, Derek tried one last tactic. He showed up at the hotel, unannounced. The receptionist called me. There's a man here asking for you. Does he have an appointment? No. Then he doesn't have access, I said calmly. I didn't go down. I didn't explain. Boundaries don't require speeches. Lena texted later. He says you've changed. I smiled slightly and typed back. I remembered. By the 3rd week, Lena had made her decision. She came to me one evening holding a single folder. I filed, she said, divorce. I reached for her hand, not to celebrate, to steady. It will be hard, I said, and then it won't. She nodded. He told me you poisoned me against him. I raised an eyebrow. I removed myself, I replied. He did the rest. She laughed softly, the first real laugh I'd heard in years. The final week passed quietly. No explosions, no last-minute miracles, just boxes, a moving truck scheduled. Roman confirmed the date. Day 30, he said. 8 a.m. I won't be there, I replied. Understood. On the morning of day 30, I woke early again, but this time it felt intentional. I took a shower, put on a soft sweater, a pair of comfortable shoes. I didn't dress for battle, I dressed for return. I went to a spa across town. Steam, warm water, silence that asked nothing of me. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. They're loading the truck. I closed my eyes, not in relief, in recognition. At noon, another message, keys handed over. I replied with one word, received. I drove home that afternoon, slowly. The gate opened easily, as if it had been waiting. The house smelled stale when I walked in, not dirty, just tired, like a place that had held its breath too long. I opened every window. Air rushed through the rooms. I stood in the family room. Empty now, marks on the floor where the couch had been. Holes in the wall from mounts I never asked for. I didn't feel anger, just resolve. I rolled up my sleeves. Warm water, soap, a mop, I cleaned in steady lines, baseboards first, corners, then the floor. Each pass felt like erasing a sentence that never belonged. By evening, the house felt different. Lighter, I boiled water, made tea. Sat in my green armchair, back where it belonged. The remote lay on the table, untouched. I didn't turn on the TV yet, I just listened to the house breathing again. The first night alone in the house felt unfamiliar. Not lonely, unfamiliar. I stood in the doorway of the family room long after the sun went down, listening to the small sounds I hadn't noticed in years, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock above the hallway, the wind brushing against the garden gate. The house wasn't empty, it was waiting. I turned on a lamp instead of the overhead light. The warm glow settled into the corners like it belonged there. I sat down in my green armchair and let myself breathe without checking the volume, without wondering who might complain. For the first time in years, nothing needed managing. That realization landed softly, but it stayed. The next morning, I woke early and opened every window again. Fresh air poured in, lifting the faint stale scent that had clung to the walls. I brewed coffee and carried my mug from room to room, not inspecting, not judging, just reacquainting myself. I ran my fingers along the banister I had polished for decades. I straightened a picture frame no one had bothered to look at. I folded a throw blanket and placed it where I liked it. Each small decision felt like reclaiming a sentence in a story that had been interrupted. By mid-morning, the painter arrived, a tall man with paint-spattered shoes and a calm voice. "Peach?" he asked, holding up the swatch. "Yes," I said, warm, quiet. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. As he worked, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open. Not a journal, a plan, not because I wanted control, but because I wanted intention. The house changed quickly. The peach walls reflected light instead of swallowing it. The family room softened, even the hallway seemed to breathe easier. When the painter finished, he stepped back and smiled. "Feels peaceful in here," he said. "It's learning," I replied. He looked at me, puzzled. "Learning what? Who it belongs to?" That evening, Lena came by. She knocked, actually knocked. I opened the door and waited. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Yes," I said. As a guest, she nodded and stepped inside carefully, like she didn't want to disturb anything. Her eyes moved around the room, taking in the fresh paint, the rearranged furniture, the absence of tension. "It looks different," she said. "It feels different," I corrected gently. We sat at the kitchen table with tea between us, no phones, no distractions. "I rented a small studio," she said. "It's not fancy, but it's mine." "That matters more than size," I said. She smiled faintly. "I pay for everything myself now." "That matters more than comfort," I replied. She hesitated. "I miss you," she admitted. "I'm still here," I said. "I'm just not disappearing anymore." She nodded slowly. That was the moment I knew she was growing. Not because she agreed with me, but because she wasn't asking me to shrink. Over the next few weeks, the house settled into its new rhythm. Neighbors waved again. I invited a few friends over for tea, women who had quietly been carrying too much for too long. They noticed immediately. "You look lighter," one said. "I stopped holding things that weren't mine," I replied. They nodded. They understood more than they said. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I stared at it. I knew who it was. I let it ring, then I blocked it. Closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes it just requires silence. Lena visited regularly, always knocking, always asking. She never stayed late, she never brought bags, she never asked for money. And slowly our conversations changed. We talked about books, work. What she wanted, not what she was afraid of losing. One evening, she looked at me across the table and said something that stayed with me. "I didn't know you could say no without being cruel." I smiled. "No isn't cruel," I said. "It's honest," she nodded. "I think I'm finally learning who I am." "That's the work," I replied. "The rest is noise." On a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't urgent, it wasn't loud, just polite. When I opened the door, my neighbor stood there, twisting her purse strap nervously. "My son wants me to sign something," she said. "He says it's just paperwork." I didn't invite panic in. I invited her inside. We sat at the table. We read slowly. We talked about wills, about boundaries, about time. She left standing straighter than she arrived. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't just my house learning my name again, it was my life. That night, I returned to my armchair. The remote rested on the table. I picked it up and turned on the music, soft, measured, exactly as loud as I wanted it. No footsteps approached, no one reached for the volume. I closed my eyes and let the sound fill the room, not to escape, but to arrive. I wrote one sentence in my notebook before bed. Peace isn't quiet, it's chosen. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and slept like someone who was no longer renting space in her own life. The house slept differently now, not quieter, calmer, like it no longer needed to brace itself for footsteps that carried tension instead of love. I woke before sunrise, the way I always had, but this time there was no urgency in it. No silent checklist running through my mind, no anticipation of moods I would need to manage before breakfast. Just light. I sat at the edge of the bed and listened. The house answered me back with stillness. I made coffee and drank it by the window, watching the neighborhood wake up. Cars started, birds argued over branches, someone laughed 2 houses down. Life moved on without asking permission, and for the first time in years, so did I. That morning, I took out the last box from the hall closet. Not clothes, not papers, memories, old photographs, birthday cards, school drawings Lena had made when she was small. One crooked house she had drawn in crayon, smoke curling out of the chimney. I held it for a long time. Back then, she had drawn this house, before fear, before silence, before I taught her that peace meant swallowing discomfort. I whispered softly to no one and to everyone, I'm sorry I didn't protect this sooner. The house didn't answer, but I felt understood. Lena came by that afternoon. She had a new haircut, shorter, brighter. She looked like someone who had finally exhaled. I signed the last papers today, she said. It's done. I nodded. No celebration, no grief, just acknowledgement. How do you feel? I asked. She thought for a moment. Scared, she admitted, but free. That's the correct order, I said. She smiled. We sat together without filling the space with words. That was new for us, and good. Later that week, I walked into my bank and made changes I should have made years ago. Separate accounts, clear beneficiaries, explicit instructions. The clerk asked gently, any reason for the update? Yes, I replied. I plan to live clearly. She smiled. I left lighter. That evening, I hosted tea again. 3 women this time, different stories, same fear, adult children, shared accounts, pressure disguised as love. We talked slowly, we laughed carefully, we practiced saying sentences out loud. I'm not ready to sign anything. I need time to think. No, by the end, no one felt rude, they felt strong. One of them said quietly, I thought love meant sacrifice. It does, I replied, but not self-erasure. Weeks passed. The house filled with warmth instead of noise. I painted a small room into a reading nook. I planted herbs in the garden. I learned the sound of my own footsteps again. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and paused. Same gray hair, same glasses, but my eyes were different. They weren't waiting. One night, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect. From Lena, thank you for not rescuing me. I read it twice, then I replied. Thank you for standing up. We didn't need more words than that. The remote still sits on the end table. I don't think about it anymore. It's just an object now, not a symbol, not a weapon, not a test. I turn the volume up or down as I please. That's all power ever was, choice. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things ended. I don't. I regret how long I waited. But regret is useless unless it teaches you something. Mine taught me this: you don't owe anyone access to your peace. Not your children, not your family, not anyone who benefits from your silence. Love doesn't demand disappearance. On a quiet evening, I sat in my green armchair again. The same one, but this time I belonged in it. I turned on music and let it play a little louder than usual. Not to prove anything, just because I wanted to. The house didn't flinch. It held the sound, like it trusted me now. Before bed, I wrote one final line in my notebook. I didn't lose my family. I stopped losing myself. I closed the book, turned off the light, and slept deeply without bracing for morning. Something strange happened after everything settled. People started calling, not loudly, not dramatically. Quiet calls, careful voices, women my age, neighbors, friends of friends, sisters, widows, mothers. They didn't ask for money. They asked questions. How did you say no without losing your family? Were you scared? Did you feel guilty? How did you know it was time? I invited them for tea. Every Wednesday at 4, no speeches, no advice unless asked. Just stories, and every story sounded familiar. One woman said, my son wants me to sign the house over early. He says it'll be easier later. Another whispered, my daughter moved back in temporarily. It's been 6 years. A third laughed bitterly. They say I'm selfish if I want quiet. I didn't interrupt. I poured tea, and then I said something simple. Let's separate love from fear. They leaned in. Fear says, if I don't give, I'll be alone. If I say no, they'll stop loving me. If I set boundaries, I'm cruel. Love says, I want you safe. I want you whole. I don't need to erase myself to care. Most of us were taught fear and told it was love. That wasn't our fault, but staying there forever would be our choice. Lena came sometimes, not every week, only when she wanted to. She knocked now, always. She never brought bags that needed storing, only herself. One afternoon, she said quietly, I finally understand something. I looked at her. When you stopped rescuing me, she said, I had to rescue myself. I nodded. That was always the point. The house continued to change, not bigger, not fancier, just truer. I hung photos I loved, not ones meant to impress. I cooked what I enjoyed, I slept when I wanted, I stopped explaining myself. That was the biggest upgrade of all. One evening, I sat in the family room again. Same chair, same window, same walls, but this time I felt something different. Ownership not just of the house, of my time, my voice, my peace. I realized something that startled me. I wasn't angry anymore, not at Derek, not even at myself. Anger had been replaced by clarity, and clarity is quiet. People think power looks loud. Raised voices, big moves, final speeches. But real power is walking away without shouting. It's turning off the utilities and letting reality speak. It's choosing silence instead of begging to be heard. I wrote one last thing in my notebook, not advice, not rules, just truth. If someone treats your kindness like a weakness, stop explaining and start choosing. I closed the book. I didn't need it anymore. Now, when I sit in my green armchair and turn on the TV, no one touches the remote. No one tells me where to go. No one mistakes my softness for permission. The volume is exactly where I like it. And if I want silence, I choose that too. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels tight, if you're sitting in a room that doesn't feel like yours anymore, if someone has been calling your patience love while draining you, this is your sign. Not to explode, not to argue, but to decide you don't need to be cruel to be free, you don't need to be loud to be powerful, and you don't need permission to protect your peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, let me know in the comments. Backhand index pointing right, which city are you listening from? Backhand index pointing right, and what part hit closest to home? I share stories like this every day, real, quiet, powerful life lessons. If you don't want to miss the next one, subscribe. And if you can, like this video so it reaches someone who needs it. You're not alone. And neither was I, once I remembered who held the keys.